Back 4 Blood is not just a Left 4 Dead style game, it's also technically the spiritual successor to the Left 4 Dead franchise. From Warner Bros. Interactive and Turtle Rock Studios, many are considering Back 4 Blood a Left 4 Dead 3 of sorts. Well, this weekend I was lucky enough to have the opportunity to play the closed alpha of Back 4 Blood, and today I'm going to talk about my brief thoughts on the game.
Stars and Stripes!
Hello and welcome to another Carrot Scraps video, and by another I mean the 43rd. So first of all, let me just say how cool it is to be playing a game like Back 4 Blood. It's something that honestly I didn't really think I needed until it was announced at the Game Awards. I think that was the earliest it was announced, right? It took me a while to get into mainstream video games and console video games and first-person shooters specifically. But the first games that I played on my Xbox 360 that I bought from a friend in high school for $60 was Portal 1 and the original Left 4 Dead, which of course led into Left 4 Dead 2. So I put a lot of hours into this game, and I was surprised to realize that there's a lot of nostalgia here for this franchise for me. It's just unlike other things that I'm nostalgic for, I stopped playing Left 4 Dead and haven't thought about it until the announcement of Back 4 Blood. So again, I just want to say how cool it is to be able to play this game. So I'm going to get into more specific details about my feelings on the alpha, but let me start off by saying I really enjoyed it. In my opinion, the point of this alpha was to prove to fans of Left 4 Dead that Back 4 Blood is a spiritual successor to that game. That's how I interpret this alpha, and if that was their goal, I think they succeeded. So if you're curious about Back 4 Blood and you are a fan of Left 4 Dead, I can say that this is definitely the spiritual successor to Left 4 Dead you've been looking for, and the sequel that you've wanted. I genuinely think this game plays very, very similarly to the original Left 4 Dead and Left 4 Dead 2. But I think it's important to note that while I think that they accomplished their goal of letting Left 4 Dead fans know that Back 4 Blood is the spiritual successor they've been waiting for, that other than that, this game really doesn't stand out on its own. Yes, there are qualities in Back 4 Blood that distinguish it from its predecessors, but at the end of the day, there's not a lot that makes Back 4 Blood unique compared to Left 4 Dead. Instead, there's more that makes it similar, which I think was the intention, but in the future, I'd like to see more variation. But we'll talk about that later. Overall, I did enjoy the alpha, and again, I think they accomplished their goal. As I get into more specific points that I have about the alpha, just remember that these are my early thoughts on the game, and that this isn't a final review or something like that. My opinions are definitely subject to change as I play more of the game. So let me first go over the brief, story and lore, and we'll talk shortly about how the beta worked and kind of the story behind it, and then again, we'll get into more specific details. Oh my goodness. What is going on over there? That is not a room I want to be inside. So instead of a general zombie apocalypse, there's a new type of zombie threat in Back 4 Blood called the Ridden. And from the trailer and the opening cinematic, it seems like it's some kind of worm or some kind of... I don't know, that's all I got. They're little worms. What do you want me? What do you want me to say? They're little worms. During the alpha, we don't get many details about the characters or what their story is. What we do know is that the playable characters are known as cleaners. And from what I personally can gather from the start of the environment in the first level, it seems like these characters were barricaded inside of a home before they decided to go on their zombie killing adventure. And then at whatever point when they decided it was safe enough, they decided to break out of this house that they had boarded up. And in the alpha, you play through multiple levels and multiple stages, very similar to the original Left 4 Dead, until you arrive at the final destination, which is an extraction point where the military or some kind of militia rescues you and your team after you destroy a boat that is separating you from the Ridden. Most, if not all, of the gameplay is just a first-person shooter. You get a main gun, and then you gotta get a sidearm, which is either a melee weapon or a weaker gun. Occasionally, you'll have the opportunity to replace your primary and secondary weapon with weapons that you find scattered around the map randomly. In addition to the first-person shooter mechanics, you also have a card system, and this card system lets you choose different loadouts to customize your specific cleaners, perks, and nerfs. But the final stage with the boat requires 2 of your team members to go and plant explosives on the boat, and then you need to set them to explode while you try to escape the explosion. So when it comes to the card system, I didn't really have a great experience with it, and I blame myself primarily. I really should have taken more time to explore the cards. I tried to make a custom deck, and then I had a bad experience because I didn't understand exactly what was happening, and then I didn't touch the cards again. I really regret this decision, and if I have the opportunity to play the game again, I would definitely dive deeper into the card system. Essentially, whatever deck I made took away my primary weapon from me, and either I had a card equipped that removed that primary weapon, or I didn't have a card that gave me that primary weapon. Either way, it didn't create a fun experience for me, so I didn't want to mess with the cards anymore. But on paper, the card system looks really great. I think it's one of the more unique parts of Back 4 Blood when comparing it to Left 4 Dead. I do feel like card decks are always a little bit of a cliche in video games, but honestly, they're a really cool idea, especially with a multiplayer game. I don't think the cards are anything special in Back 4 Blood, but I do think that they're perfectly efficient. At least on face value, that is. When I'm reading the cards, they are all really interesting, like, abilities and ideas. I really like the idea of customizing your loadout for a game like Left 4 Dead. When reading the card descriptions and considering how they work with the rest of the game, and with my brief interactions with the game based on my custom deck, I actually really like the inclusion of the cards. All the cards seem pretty appealing, and I like that you can make preset decks. In the game, there's also a currency system called copper. You can collect copper by exploring the environment, or from defeating certain enemies. In safe rooms between levels, you can spend copper you've earned on weapon upgrades, status items, and items like grenades. I really like this system. It might be one of my favorite differences from Back 4 Blood versus Left 4 Dead. I feel like the copper system gives you a variety of options when it comes to the start of a stage. For example, if I failed a mission multiple times, I feel like I started the mission with different gear and upgrades every time, and that was a consideration that I made to try and improve on my previous mistakes. So I kind of like the flexibility with that exchange of a currency. And I don't think I implied this, but just so we're clear, the copper system is not a microtransaction. I know it gets scary whenever you talk about in-game currencies, but this is just an in-game currency that is not related to our money at all. Just make that clear. Getting new sights and laser pointers feels good to earn, and it's not too far off for you to achieve, which is really nice. I feel like it rocks that balance of, you know, you earned it, but it's not the hardest thing in the world to get. And speaking of difficulty, I played the majority of the alpha on the first of 3 difficulties, which was classic. I don't know what classic is in reference to, but while playing, I have to ask myself this question. Am I just bad at this game? So while playing, I managed to die like a lot. In fact, during my playtime, I very rarely completed a run. So I don't know if I'm just bad at video games. I mean, normally that's the case, but I don't know if I'm bad at video games, or if my team wasn't coordinating well enough, or if maybe the difficulty needs to be adjusted. I will say that when I was playing with a complete group of bots, I was able to run through the entire first level with just a baseball bat and very little interactions. So I don't know what that means exactly, but it happened. In addition, when I did play on the second hardest difficulty, I actually didn't have that hard of a time. So maybe I just had a better team while I was playing on harder difficulties, or maybe I potentially got better at the game while I was playing for longer. But I just wanted to quickly mention that I did feel like I was being downed a lot, and I wasn't sure whether that was just me or whether the difficulty is a little bit off. I will also say that I think maybe zombie spawns could be a little bit better. Sometimes I felt like there were too many of the same mutated enemy in the same area. Like, I would put all this energy into fighting one mutated enemy, and then as soon as they die, right behind them there's 2 more, and that didn't always feel the greatest, especially when I'd get hit with a strong attack immediately after. But again, maybe I just need to change my strategy. I'm just giving my loose thoughts on the game, you know? But speaking of mutated enemies, let's talk about the Ridden in the game. So I think Ridden is the general name, like that's the, I don't know if it's the name of the virus, but it's the name of what you are after the virus takes you. But then there are also mutated enemies, which is essentially the character zombies from Left 4 Dead. Off the top of my head, the mutated enemies in Back 4 Blood are the Wretch, which essentially pukes this bile on you, which decreases your health slowly, and if you kill that enemy too close to you, it'll get guts all over you, which attracts other Ridden. Then there's the Snitch, which you need to be careful with, because if you alert it, it will attract a horde to your location. There's the Spider, I think it's called. No, it's not called the Spider. Hi everyone, Editing Scraps here, just to remind you that Carrotscraps got it wrong, and that this enemy is not called the Spider, but instead the Stinger. And he's going to continue to call it the Spider for the rest of the video, because that's I don't know, that's his whole life. But I just wanted to let you know that the enemy is actually called the Stinger, so I'm sorry about that. I hope that doesn't affect your view of him. I'm cool though. I'm Editing Scraps. I'm not related to that guy. Anyway, back to the video, which essentially goes really high up and shoots you with a web and freezes you in place. And unless you have a team member close by, you're not going to be able to escape that webbing. I labeled this next one as Dash, and I thought that was a dumb name, but then apparently his name is Tallboy, or Bruiser, depending on who you ask. I feel like Tall Boy / Bruiser is the most similar to previous Left 4 Dead typings, you know what I mean? But he's just really large. He has a large arm that he can use to strike at you, and he can bridge the distance between himself and one of your allies or yourself very quickly. And then lastly, the biggest addition to Back 4 Blood versus the original set of you know, character zombies, as I like to call them, is the Ogre. And the Ogre is huge. I feel like when they released the trailer at the Game Awards, this was the big moment to kind of show people, like, this isn't just Left 4 Dead, like, we're gonna try some big new stuff here. And the Ogre is just overwhelming power, just so much HP. It's crazy. And that should be all of the mutated Ridden in the game. So let me just give my thoughts on some of them individually that, you know, I felt a specific way about. I guess we'll go into the Ogre because I was talking about them first. So I think the Ogre really adds tension and is one of those details that really highlights this game's difference from the original. However, while I think he looks really cool, I didn't really find him fun to fight, honestly. I just never felt like I was doing enough damage to him to feel like I was making any progress. And then he would leave as soon as we took like 25% of his HP bar. In some stages, he would return again with the same amount of HP, but I was never able to defeat the Ogre, and I don't feel like we were ever given an opportunity to defeat the Ogre. I never felt like that was a possibility while playing. Now again, it's possible that I'm just bad at video games and I wasn't able to do that, or potentially the developers didn't program in like a death animation for the Ogre yet, and so it's just meant to show off what it can do and what it's like to fight this creature, but you're not meant to, you know, reach a climax with that enemy, you know what I mean? In the trailers for the game, they talk about how every scenario is going to be different. They wanted to focus on variety and creating these unique experiences. And honestly, most of Back 4 Blood reflects this. You can react to enemies and scenarios in a ton of different ways. But in my opinion, the Ogre is the only part of Back 4 Blood that doesn't fit that agenda. At the end of the day, the Ogre is very scripted. It only appears in specific locations, and you really don't have that much of a variety of options to choose when approaching it. You either try to fight it or you run away. And most of the times I ran away because I didn't feel like I could really defeat this enemy. I like the idea of the Ogre because it's exciting and it's cinematic, and it is one of the few differences that this has when compared to Left 4 Dead. But I wish it was more than just flashy. I wish it had more substance. But that's why I'm excited for the future of the game and the future alphas and betas that we might experience. I'm hoping that I'll get to see a larger picture the next time we get to play this game. The last thing I have to say about the Ogre is that it will occasionally grab you and throw you across the map, and sometimes I felt like when I was tossed, it would throw me into an area where I was just so disoriented I didn't even know what was happening. Sometimes I thought that I had clipped through like an invisible wall or something like that. So I like the idea of being picked up by the Ogre and being tossed around. I think that's really scary and very tense, but maybe a better falling or tossing animation could be implemented in the future. All right, so let's move on to a positive and talk about the mutated enemy called the Spider. At least I think that's what they're called. No, again, that is not what it's called. They're called the Stinger. You made a huge mistake. Stop saying. So as I mentioned earlier, the Spider will shoot webbing at you or one of your allies, and they will be frozen there until one of your allies can melee them out of that state. Now, I think my favorite mutated enemy is probably the Wretch, but I actually like the Spider's gameplay implementations a little bit more. So first of all, I really love that the Spider goes so high up. A lot of the combat is very grounded, and it's really nice to add this verticality to everything. It really forces players to stay on their toes and remember that they have to look up every now and again because there could be a spider hanging from the ceiling or on a pillar looking down on you ready to attack. I think that's a really cool idea to keep you on your toes in a very different way than you normally would be while playing this game, and I'd like to see more mutated enemies that force players to do that. The second thing I like about the Spider is that it really encourages you to play with a team. Now, I'm not proud of this, but I will admit that sometimes I was a little too gung-ho and I would just run ahead of everybody else. I don't know why I would do this. Again, I don't defend my actions. But when I would briefly ditch my group, I would be attacked by a spider and frozen in place all by myself. In these moments, it made me realize how much I needed my teammates in this game and how dumb I was for separating myself from the group. Both for running ahead too early or for lagging behind and seeing my teammates far ahead of me while I'm easy pickings for a spider and a bunch of Ridden. This is a multiplayer game and it is a co-op game, and I really like this enemy and that it forces you to think about your team dynamic a little bit better. And the final mutated enemy that I wanted to talk about really quickly was the Wretch. So the Wretch is actually my favorite mutated enemy of all of the ones featured in Back 4 Blood, but I do have some minor criticisms of them. The wretch felt kind of cheap at times. Often when I saw them, it was already too late, and there was little I could do to avoid this very significant attack. This leads to a suggestion that I have for all of the mutated groups in Back 4 Blood. Now, all of these mutated enemies do make a specific sound to some extent, but I think it would be kind of cool if they developed a sound for each mutated enemy that could kind of warn the player before you see them. Nothing too obvious that would ruin the surprise, but just something that could reward eagle-eared players for their vigilance. It's possible that this is already in the game and I just didn't notice it, but I just think it's a cool idea that you can warn your teammates that you heard a sound that could potentially be a scary mutated enemy. However, that being said, the nature of the game is speed, and even if this was implemented, there's a chance that when you hear that sound, it's already too late. Anyway, that was just my quick idea. I thought it might be kind of interesting. Anyway, even though I criticized the wretch for being a little cheap, I genuinely think he was the most distinct enemy of the group. Because he would often damage me so much, I became hyper aware of his presence. When playing the game, I was looking for them around every corner, and when I would find one of them, I had an exit strategy already planned, plus I made it a priority to remove this enemy off of the field as quickly as possible. I felt like it was really cool that the game had provoked that response from me. However, like I mentioned earlier, I will say that sometimes it felt like there were too many of these special enemies in one area. For example, when I would successfully react to one wrench, it would turn out that there was another one right behind them, and that they would take advantage of my weakness immediately. The same goes for tall boys. I suppose I don't mind that there are multiples of the same enemy on the field at the same time. I just wish they weren't spawning so close together. Now let's really quickly talk about the guns in the game, and then we'll return back to the enemies and talk about the Ridden once again. So to be extremely frank, the weapon selection in the alpha isn't super diverse. I don't think it was supposed to be. As I keep saying, I think that the point of the alpha was to sell you on the fact that this game is the new Left 4 Dead. If they do another alpha or beta, I think that their goal is going to be to prove that they have more interesting weapons in the future. But in the alpha, all you had were a shotgun, a tactical shotgun, an assault rifle, an Uzi, some handguns, and melee weapons. These were really simple weapons, and they really didn't stand out compared to the weapons that were featured in Left 4 Dead 2, for example. But as I keep saying, I think this was intentional. I don't think the point of this alpha was to show off the weapons in the game. So even though there wasn't a huge variety of weapons, I do expect a variety of weapons in the future of this game. But the guns that we did have in the game did feel pretty satisfying. So something that I found really satisfying in this alpha was headshots. Whenever I'd get a headshot, there was a very satisfying pop of an enemy's head. At least the normal generic Ridden were like this. I had a lot of fun perfectly aiming my shots and bursting these heads like watermelons. This is one of my favorite things about the alpha. Good job on that one, everybody. Woohoo! That being said, I noticed that certain enemies have weak points. It's possible that I'm misunderstanding this correctly and that this is just part of the general design of certain mutations, but specifically the ogre and the tall boy seem to have these protruding red segments that come in the shape of orbs. They kind of remind me of the boss from the end of the Resident Evil 3 remake. Just these bulbous red glowing orbs that draw your eye to them immediately. Now that I think about it, the wretch and the stinger also have weak points. I think the stinger is on their chest, and then the wretch has like a big bulbous head. Anyway, my point is, I like these weak points a lot. They really serve to separate these larger mutations from the crowd. You can see their glowing weak point from far away, and you know that you're in for trouble. The thing is, when you attack these weak points, I don't feel like there's a satisfying response in the same way that there is when you get like a perfect headshot in the game. Like I said, I really loved popping zombies' heads in this alpha. It's got a really satisfying sound and animation, and I think gameplay would be greatly improved if these mutated enemies' weak spots bursted in the same way. Because while I assume that these are weak spots, when I attack them, they don't really react, at least from my playthrough, and so it made me second guess that these were actually doing anything when I shot at them. I started to think that I was crazy for thinking that they were weak spots, and that these were instead just stylistic choices. I'm honestly still not sure whether these bulbous tomatoes are weak points or design choices, but I'm pretty sure that they're weak points, and I wanted to give this criticism really quickly. I really think it would greatly improve the game if the weak points reacted better to your gunfire. Before I finish my thoughts on the alpha, I wanted to really quickly talk about the characters in the game. Now, we really don't get an introduction to these characters, and what we know about them is very little and very brief. In classic Left 4 Dead fashion, we learn about these characters primarily from hearing them talk to each other during combat. These lines between these characters are definitely very corny, and I would say that similar to the original Avengers beta, that sometimes their lines were triggering too often for me to really enjoy them. But just because they're corny doesn't mean they're bad. I actually thought they were very endearing when I'd hear kind of tongue-in-cheek corny line delivery. In addition, one of my favorite things about these characters is when you get a close look at the character illustration when you're choosing your character, you can kind of get a feel for who these people are. For example, Walker is wearing a shirt with a symbol that says sniper on it, so I could assume that potentially he was in the military at some point. Either that, or he's just a skull and sniper enthusiast. And you can make these kind of observations with the other characters as well if you look at their character models. I think they're all very distinct, and I'm excited to learn more about them, and I'm also excited to see if we get more characters in the full game. I honestly think it's very likely that we'll get way more characters in the full game. Of the four, I really liked playing as Walker the best because he has a non-melee secondary weapon. I really wanted to play as Holly because I like playing as the girl characters. I also really like her character design, but because of my whole card situation, I ended up blaming her for that problem, and I chose Walker as my main instead. That's a completely biased testimony. If you enjoy playing as Holly, I understand. But the majority of my playtime was done as Evangelo. I don't know why, it's just whenever I did quick play, I would join a group as him for some reason. I did not play as Hoffman at all, but from his dialogue, I really liked the Insomniac vibe I got from him. Like, he really seems like he's a sheltered hypochondriac, which is always a funny archetype. So yeah, all of these characters were really endearing, and they were really fun to play as, and I like all of their designs. The one criticism I'll give is that other than Holly, these characters tend to have the same palette or a similar palette to the enemies that you're fighting or the environments that you're in. So a lot of the times I ended up shooting at my comrades, because in the chaos of battle, the way they looked made me think that they were an enemy. So my suggestion on that would be to up the saturation on the few colors that these other characters wear, so that way you can visually see that the character models look different and brighter than the enemies that you're fighting, or by constantly highlighting your allies on the playing field. That could get a little bit annoying after a while, but maybe you can include a toggle on and off feature for that. Just a thought, I would prefer that the character models just be brighter in general like Holly is. But I just wanted to say that I did get confused, maybe not a lot, but frequently, when it came to distinguishing my allies from my enemies. So in conclusion, I really loved playing Back 4 Blood. It really seems like the developers want to make a Left 4 Dead 3, and so I don't think they mind the comparisons. And I definitely think it was the right move to make it so similar. If you're wondering if Back 4 Blood plays like Left 4 Dead, it does. 100% it does. And if that affects whether you buy the game or not, and that's the final deciding factor, I think you're sold so far. If you're looking for Left 4 Dead 3, this is it in my opinion. Now, all of that being said, while I'm happy that they accomplished their goal of proving that this is the spiritual successor to Left 4 Dead, I would like to see more variation in the future. The card system, the copper system, and the ogre is a great start, but it would be nice to see more differences moving forward. In addition, I don't think this is the full game. I think this was just to give us a test. Again, I think it was just to tell fans of Left 4 Dead that this is going to be the next Left 4 Dead. So if there is another alpha or if there's a beta, I think that we're going to see more mutated enemies, more weapon variety, and potentially more characters. That's my hope, but it's also my intuition that we're going to get more in the future. What I'm trying to say is that this wasn't meant to show us the entire game, it was just meant to give us a little taste to make us want more. I'm excited to see if we get another opportunity to play the game before launch. I really want another shot at the card system. While I call it cliche, I actually really love card mechanics in video games. That's honestly the only reason why I ever played Kingdom Hearts Chain of Memories way back in the day on the Game Boy Advance. I saw there were card mechanics in there and I was like, I gotta play this. Never played a Kingdom Hearts game other than that. But I feel bad that I didn't get a greater idea of how the cards work. I'm really disappointed by the impression that I got with the card system, but I don't want to write it off just yet. I'm willing to believe that I made a mistake that made the card system seem odd to me, but it's something that I'm open to, that I'm excited about, that I really want to see more of in the game, and that I can only really learn more about with more exposure to. Back 4 Blood comes out on June 22nd, 2021, and I cannot wait for it. Anyway, that's going to do it for this video. If for some reason you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a like and to subscribe to my channel for more. I'm always live on Twitch, and I'm probably going to be reviewing a lot of my raw Back 4 Blood footage on my Twitch channel, so if that sounds interesting to you at all, make sure to check me out on Twitch at carrotscraps. I'm also at carrotscraps on Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram. I want to thank you again so much for watching this video, and I will see you soon. So I applied for the closed alpha immediately as it became available, but I'm notoriously awful at checking my email. So I actually missed the first like 2 days of Back 4 Blood gameplay. I'm really kicking myself for it now. I was very disappointed in myself for letting that slip. It's kind of classic carrot scraps, honestly. But I'm glad that I was able to notice it eventually, and I was able to play for the amount of time that I did. This is a learning lesson. In the future, check my email no matter what. In fact, I should be checking my email right now. I got an email about the Seahawks. I don't even know what the Seahawks are. This is why I don't check my email.